Google him, he wins. Okay, so the NCAA college football playoff and championship is over, and Curt Cignetti achieves the damn near impossible. Indiana wins a natty in 2 years. At Indiana, a place that has had or has the most losses, I've seen a couple different reports, most or second most losses in NCAA history with over 700. Curt Cignetti is going to raise the bar for every other program, including Rutgers, when it comes to expectations. And there's been a lot of blather and chatter and talk about how did he do it? Oh, it's NIL. Oh, he's cheating. All of that is nonsense. Nonetheless, the Big Ten gets their third natty in a row. I think we were 10-4 in bowl games. Vaunted SEC was 2-8 this year, and I think the ACC was actually right behind us. They might have been 8-5, 9-5, something like that. That being said, how did Frank Cignetti become the miracle man? And I've talked about this somewhat throughout various videos. Won't go into a lot of details, but we'll cover the 30,000-foot view again on some of it. No, it's not NIL. No, it's not revenue sharing. No, it's not cheating. No, it's not having top-rated recruiting classes. No, it's not raiding the portal and having the number one portal class like Shady Lane Kiffin. Indiana's 2023 class, recruiting class, was ranked 60th. The 2024 class, actually, I got that reversed. The 24 class was ranked 60th. The 25 class was ranked 46th. So how did he do it? Oh, it was Mark Cuban money. Really? I guess those 13 JMU transfers get big-time Mark Cuban money. This is not hyperbolic. What Frank Cignetti accomplished, there will be programs that try and replicate that success, that process. Most will fail. This win by Cignetti in Indiana is truly historic. It wasn't like Indiana was pretty good and they just happened to get on a run and the ball bounced their way and, they've been in the top half of the Big Ten and it just happened to go right for them this year. This is the only team in the modern NFL era to win a natty without a blue chip recruiting class. Is that part of the new reality in NCAA football? I don't think so. Could be. And I've talked about this a little bit. Indiana, 0, especially after they beat Ohio State. Ohio State, we all know, is loaded with 4- and 5-star guys. Indiana, 0 5-star guys. They have 1 4-star guy. Now, in their starting lineup, mind you, they have 1 4-star guy, some 3 stars, and 8. That's right, 8 0-star guys starting. And you're 16-0. This is what frustrates Rutgers fans and alums to no end. Indiana is essentially the team that we think we are, can be, strive to be. No, it's not Iowa, coach. A developmental program that finds good value guys that love football and want to grind and put in the work and do those things necessary to win. Under the radar guys that love football. And yes, a cultural fit. Now, I've kind of poked fun of that a lot with Coach. But Indiana and Cignetti like cultural fits, but not so much from establishing culture, but a football culture and how it is that they execute and fit that in terms of their schemes, getting the right type of guys that want to play the way they want to play within their schemes and play calling. It's going to be fast. Will Cignetti, he's 63. He's kind of a young guy. He's several years younger than me, actually. But will he take the jump next? Will he, go to the NFL? He's got a pretty sweet contract. What is he making? $13 million now. He just re-upped with Indiana, $13 million. And he might be happy putting a doormat of the Big Ten onto the national stage and being a Big Ten competitor every year. Maybe he's happy with that. Or maybe because people have called him a journeyman. He's not really a journeyman coach. He just hasn't had the big jobs, the name brand schools with winning records that other teams and NFL likes to poach guys from and use as their feeder programs. Some chatter that, hey, maybe Buffalo might take a look now. So will Frank Cignetti, that's the Rutgers thing. Curt Cignetti, we got the wrong Cignetti, actually. Will he stay or will he go? That'll be interesting. But how did Cignetti do this? By doing the things that we profess that we want to do and accomplish and push for. Grinding, execution, not making mistakes, playing smart football, putting in the effort, not making mistakes, the 5th least penalized team in the NCAA. Miami, it's kind of, actually it was one of the most penalized. So it's kind of, that dichotomy is kind of weird. But Miami, going back to, Catholics versus convicts, they were always highly kind of penalized team. They wanted experienced, mature players and experienced, mature coaches. This was the other important part, that Cignetti took his guys with him that he's been with since different stops. So all of this together, the experienced coaching staff that he's had with him, with the players, resulted in an added. But he also wanted guys, he wasn't necessarily looking for the athletic freaks, but he wanted size. You're in the Big Ten, and I've talked about how their offensive line, he wanted guys minimum 6'4", 309 pounds. Kind of makes sense. Under-recruited players, overlooked guys, maybe guys that have a chip on their shoulder. guys that they can develop insofar as getting them to execute their technique the way that they want them to execute in their system, which isn't terribly complicated. Gee, who does that sound like? Sounds like everything Coach Schiano and Rutgers wants to be. But somehow we come up short, even with classes ranked in the 30s and 40s, we come up short, and I've always poked that coach a little bit because he's more concerned about the culture. I say it's about the scheme. We have the talent to win. Indiana has proved, and Utah and other programs with recruiting classes in the 60s and 70s that somehow managed to win. And, our classes in the 30s and 40s don't. And this makes people frustrated because there's that tantalizing prospects for Rutgers, upping our recruiting game into a traditional marketplace powerhouses. We've seen how we've gone into, for high school recruiting, we've gone into Georgia, we've gone into Michigan, we've gone into Florida. It wasn't long ago that New Jersey was considered like a top 5 state for football, top 5, top 6. But New Jersey, largely suburban, largely middle to upper middle class, kind of gravitated towards other sports. Probably in a lot of places where you guys live, lacrosse has become much more popular. Soccer has become much more popular. And then those sports have made inroads where warm weather states now have all taken the mantle as the top recruiting spots. But as many have observed, with the advent of player movement in the transfer portal and NIL, it's minimized the significance of high school recruiting. And plus, if you wanted to get a high school kid in develop him, he may not want to stay around and wait to be developed. They're going to be chasing the bag, looking for greener pastures, better, more opportunities. So high school recruiting, really, they're up against it. They're between a rock and a hard place right now. You can just plug and play. Guys in the portal, you know what they are, or what they should be, or what they've shown themselves to be. There's tape. Curt Cignetti found a new model by finding guys that were experienced, that have gotten playing time, under-recruited, represented value. You don't have to spend, he even said last night, our NIL isn't what you think it is. Even though they don't have the guys with, big-time athletic talent with huge upsides from a talent, physical standpoint, they have guys that can execute play on the field. Elijah Surratt is a prime example of that. He's not an athletic stud. He just runs the right routes, doesn't drop the ball, and makes plays. Football is about blocking, tackling, throwing, catching, and kicking. That's it. Yes, I know we got a new NIL guy today from Penn State, and maybe, a lot of program watchers are excited about that. It doesn't matter. Cignetti in Indiana just proved it doesn't matter, and I'll get to why in a second. So, will other teams, Rutgers included, refocus their attention on how they go about building their programs? Now, as I've said in many ways, Coach Schiano talks about doing things the way he wants and likes to do them, while Indiana is actually doing them. A legitimate developmental program. when you look at how good Indiana was defensively. Again, they didn't have these athletically gifted studs on defense. Thinking about a signing recently of Jaden Burnett and Rondell Porter, undersized guys with good motors. Those are the kinds of guys that Cignetti gets, but he's able to turn that into success, because when you look at their defense, their linemen, they're not the most athletically or physically gifted guys, but they're physical in their play and they execute on their technique. And that's everything, for Cignetti at least. And they use a lot of stunts. And they were all except one, I think, were group of 5 transfers. One guy came from Maryland. Indiana, led in tackles for loss. Or they had the second most tackles for loss. They're like in the backfield, like every play. If you've watched them, you can just see it. They always get that pressure up front. And in Schiano's defense, it's not all scheme with Indiana. They play well collectively. They all execute what they're supposed to execute, and the end result is they have a top-ranked defense. Only 2 of their front 7 are over 6'1", so maybe we have some hope with our new portal additions. But they play bigger because they work hard, they put in the effort, and that's something that Coach Schiano looks for, but somehow Indiana is able to execute on it where we don't. On offense, again, not super complicated. They gave Mendoza the ability to play different styles. You can do a little RPO. You can do some play action, some quick passes, drop back downfield passing, the zone running offense, that the Denver Broncos used to run with Terrell Davis. Injuries aside to our offensive line, which has been beat up over the years, I always felt we had enough talent to play winning football. We just didn't put them in positions to execute, to refine their technique, and to be able to move the ball. And one of the quotes that I saw recently about Indiana is they play unbelievably well, that they're always striving for playing fundamentally well and harder and tougher than everybody else. Kind of sounds like what Schiano wants to do. And their schemes allow them to do that because it's not a bunch of Star Wars out there. They don't have a bunch of 4- and 5-star guys. These guys that were overlooked understand the scheme, the concept, and the play calling, and work within their talent level. And that's the frustration. We have the ideas about how to do that, but we can't execute, unlike Indiana and Cignetti. And as I've talked about, when you have a bunch of experienced coaches, not guys that are always looking to take the next job, and they come with you, and you have guys, experienced players, it kind of works well. So when it isn't so crazy when we criticize Coach for always looking to the Schiano pool, guys that he knows, but that can work in your favor, like it has for Indiana. Only you have to retain them, and they have to be pretty good at their job. I guess those are the 2 caveats. When you consider today's movement, whether it's players or coaches, it's not an easy thing to keep together a core of coaching staffs. Back in the day, not even back in the day, for most of my life, coaches, they liked their job, liked where they were, they stayed with it 10, 15 years. But it helps with stability. And there's been a lot of speculation, Night Report and Richie, and, I guess on the boards and the forums, about Ola Adams being whisked away from Indiana. Will that happen? I don't know. Some people are speculating that's what Coach has been waiting for. I just don't think Coach's initial targets are panning out sort of like last year. And my sense is that he's not going to overcommit and overreach by taking somebody who's just not up to the job like he did with Rob Smith. So I feel, and there was talk about this on the Night Report, the chances that Greg Schiano calls the defense to avoid getting into a bad hire where it's just better for him to call the deep. But we saw what happened against Kansas State in the bowl game a couple of years ago. We gave up, 43 points? We lost 43-40. So I'm ambivalent. I just don't feel he's been able to get his guy. Is it an NFL guy? My guess is not really. But if there's a guy in the NFL that's still playing that you kind of have to give a look at or a second look at now, maybe that's a possibility. Nonetheless, that being said, Indiana's success isn't based on, and if you see Curt Cignetti, he's a no-nonsense, no BS kind of guy. He's very unlike Schiano in that way, who's always trying to, everything is state secret. He's not blunt like Curt Cignetti, and then their teams reflect that. The offense doesn't have to be flashy to find success. They had the best running game in the Big Ten, 200 and some 20 yards a game, whatever it was. Indiana had retained the previous offensive line coach, Bob Bostad, and he did a really good job. There's a holdover from Tom Allen's staff. And, this is a guy that had 12 years in at Wisconsin who's got a, bigger, better offensive line than Wisconsin. That being said, they were able to build that wall of physical offensive linemen that were mechanically sound. Joe Tippmann on the Jets. And so you don't have to be complicated and be on the cutting edge of whatever the new style of play is. Sometimes, a lot of times, just execute fundamentals, and I've talked about this a lot, and you can succeed. And all those James Madison, and the other thing is, all those James Madison guys that came over to Indiana, they were like a players' council. They made sure that they brought the culture with them, held people accountable. They wound up achieving what nobody thought they could achieve. So they bought in, and then they got the guys at Indiana to buy in and say, hey, look what you can do. And when you look at, one of the things that Cignetti wanted to do was bring in productive guys. He just didn't want to bring them in because, they were bargain basement guys. He wanted production, and that's something I've always said. You can play at a lower level. If you can produce, you can produce. That's something we try and do, but our portal class is very spotty. And out of Cignetti's 34 players, core players, 23 were transfer portal guys. He got the right guys. And there's, a Cignetti quote along those lines that says there's a certain kind of guy that he just won't take. A guy's got to love ball. Gee, who does that sound like? He goes on to say, and they have to have some ankle, knee, hip flexibility and a certain level of athleticism. You got that from Nick Saban. And then the last thing he talks about is habits. How bad do they want it? Are they going to put into the work to get there? And are they coachable? And it all sounds very Schiano-like, but somehow Indiana was able to do it when we've struggled. And as I said earlier, Indiana has raised the expectation for Rutgers and others. And by the way, the New England Patriots are going through that this year. Worst to first in a year. With the hiring of a GM and Kelly Zinn and an NIL guy, none of that's going to matter. Sorry, young guys, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. The teams that were always good when I was a kid are still good now. You got to be able to win games. And you can do it with 8 zero-star starters, as Curt Cignetti has shown. Yes, it's the new frontier, blah, 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 revenue sharing, player movement. We have to modernize our approach in NIL. The other thing that Cignetti has shown is that that's all nonsense. Cignetti is, in his own words, the GM, the coach, and the talent evaluator. He's involved with everything, very detail-oriented. Kind of sounds like Coach Schiano, right? I don't know how detailed Coach gets when assessing individual players, but Cignetti's player evaluation process is meticulous, and he's involved. He is in the middle of it no matter where he's been. And that is probably the reason why he wins everywhere he's gone. He is the GM, the head coach, and he makes the final call on all the players. And as I said, he values production over potential. Great. Rutgers, we're getting a lot more 4-star guys now. But we're not getting there in the win column. And some of the guys like Moses Walker, a little bit of a disappointment. That being said, Eric O'Neill, Bradley Weaver, they were productive before they got to Rutgers. Not when they got to Rutgers, not so much. Now, is that the Rob Smith thing? Probably a big part of it. But it's that attention to detail and finding those productive guys and getting them in the right scheme and getting them to do what it is they do well in order to play well collectively that matters. Coach Schiano, he's on the right path as far as what he wants to accomplish, but he needs to tie it all together and wrap it up in a nice bow, and we haven't been able to wrap it up in a nice bow. Even taking Fernando Mendoza, he was just an okay quarterback at Cal. 2023, 14 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Okay. In the portal era, I guess you would get overpaid for 14 and 10. 2024, a little better, 16 and 6. Still not elite. Kind of a lot like Ethan. Cignetti took Curtis Rourke from Ohio and turned him into a college football playoff team. There's something the way that Curt Cignetti goes about his business and the way that they deploy their guys from the transfer portal in their schemes that works for them. And we're going to have to get used to this and get better at it because there's a lot of people that are seeking greener pastures. Yes, a lot will chase the bag. But there's only so much bag to go around, right? You want to like where you are, be comfortable, have the right coaching staff, maybe you want to be close to home. Maybe you need a change of scenery. That being said, all of that to say, where are we going in 2026? Where does our program stand? Now, composite recruiting rank for 2026 is around 40-ish. Well, it doesn't matter in the portal era. Yeah, it's nice that we finally caught up in getting good recruits, but doesn't matter anymore. We'll find out. So far, our, the results aren't great on paper, at least in our 2026 portal class. The result, it's not promising. On the underwhelming portal so far. We still need quarterback, we need safety, interior lineman. Although, I think the team right now might be standing pat on safety. Nonetheless, probably going to need some wide receiver depth. Where is our DC search going to land us? That's going to be big. No matter who it is, if we can just be average on defense, we can grind our way to a 6-6, 7-5 record, which means to be seen with got kind of a tough schedule next year. When are we going to be able to make that jump? And and I've said, well, we're not looking for a Big Ten or national championship. Just make progress. Be, 8-4, 9-3 like USC every year. But now, Curt Cignetti in Indiana has raised the bar for everyone, especially underperforming programs like Rutgers. So that's all I got for today. We have Iowa tonight, and I think we're an 18.5 point underdog. Boy, this can get ugly. They do well what we don't, and that is shoot that three, and we don't defend it very well. So this could be potentially an ugly game. We'll see how it shakes out. We're going to need a couple wins going forward to avoid that spiral to the bottom. Nonetheless, everybody, stay warm. It's going to be brutally cold for the next few days. It was cold this morning. It was like 10 degrees out. Apparently some big snow on the way this coming weekend. So be warm, stay safe, everybody. And we'll see you the next time.